The telegram arrived on the worst possible morning, when Zara Owens was already buried under a mountain of troubles that seemed determined to crush her into the Dakota dust. She stood in the doorway of her modest farmhouse outside Sioux Falls, South Dakota, her calloused fingers trembling as she read the official notice for the third time, as if the words might rearrange themselves into something less devastating. The county tax collector would arrive in exactly 7 days to claim payment of $247, a sum that might as well have been $2,000 for all the hope she had of producing it. The year was 1878, and spring had come late to the Dakota Territory, bringing with it wind that howled across the prairie like something alive and angry. Zara pressed her forehead against the doorframe, fighting the burning sensation behind her eyes. She had not cried when Thomas died 2 years ago, thrown from a spooked horse that left him broken on the rocky ground. She had not cried through the lonely winter that followed, or the one after that. She would not cry now. Behind her, the floorboards creaked as her daughter Emma padded into the room, still rubbing sleep from her eyes. At 8 years old, the girl had her father's dark hair and serious eyes that seemed to understand far more than they should. "Mama, what is it?" Emma asked, her voice small in the early morning quiet. "Nothing for you to worry about, sweetheart," Zara said, forcing brightness into her tone as she folded the telegram and tucked it into her apron pocket. "Just some business I need to attend to in town." "Is it about money again?" The question landed like a stone in still water, and Zara turned to face her daughter. Sometimes she forgot how much the child noticed, how little escaped those watchful eyes. "We will manage," Zara said firmly. "We always do. Now, how about you help me with breakfast, and then we will check on the chickens together." But managing had become increasingly difficult with each passing season. The small farm Thomas had built with his own hands was meant to support a family, but it required a man's strength to work it properly. Zara had tried. God knew she had tried. She had learned to milk the cow, tend the vegetable garden, repair the fence when winter storms tore it down. She had taken in sewing and laundry from the wealthier families in Sioux Falls, her fingers working late into the night by candlelight until they cramped and bled. It still was not enough. After settling Emma with her breakfast of cornmeal mush and dried apples, Zara walked out to survey her small kingdom of struggling crops and weathered buildings. The chicken coop needed new boards. The barn roof sagged dangerously on one side. The vegetable garden was planted, but late, because she had been sick with fever for 2 weeks in March. Everything was held together with determination and prayer, and now the tax collector was coming to tear it all apart. She was feeding the chickens when she heard the sound of hoofbeats approaching from the main road. Visitors were rare enough that Emma came running from the house, curiosity overcoming her usual shyness. A rider appeared over the gentle rise of the prairie, silhouetted against the morning sun. As he drew closer, Zara recognized him as one of the men she had seen occasionally in town. He sat his horse with the easy grace of someone who had spent more of his life in the saddle than on solid ground. He was tall, she could see that even mounted, with broad shoulders and sun-darkened skin that spoke of long days working outdoors. A worn hat shadowed his face, but she caught a glimpse of a strong jaw and eyes that were surprisingly kind as he pulled his horse to a stop near her fence. "Morning, madam," he said, touching the brim of his hat. His voice was deep and warm, with a slight drawl that suggested origins further south. "Name is Mason Drake. I hope I am not intruding." "That depends on what you are here for, Mr. Drake," Zara replied, keeping her voice level despite the sudden acceleration of her heartbeat. She had learned to be cautious of strange men, even ones with kind eyes. "Well, I will be honest with you, Mrs. Owens. I heard in town that you might be looking for someone to help with some of the heavier work around your place. I have experience with farming, carpentry, animal husbandry. I am good with my hands and I do not mind hard work. Zara stared at him, confusion mingling with suspicion. I have not put out any such word, Mr. Drake. I do not know who told you that, but they were mistaken. Something flickered across his face, an expression she could not quite read. My apologies, then. I must have misunderstood. But he made no move to leave. Instead, his gaze traveled over the property, taking in the sagging barn roof, the broken fence rails, the general air of disrepair that no amount of pride could hide. Though I can see there is work that needs doing, I would be happy to help, even just for a day or two. I do not require much in terms of payment. I cannot pay you at all, Zara said bluntly. I cannot even pay my property taxes, Mr. Drake, so I certainly cannot afford to hire help, however reasonable your rates might be. She had not meant to reveal so much, and she felt heat rise to her cheeks as his eyes returned to her face. But there was no pity in his expression, only thoughtful consideration. What if I told you I would work for meals and a place to sleep in your barn? He asked. I have been traveling for a while now, and I could use a few days of rest before moving on. Seems like we might be able to help each other out. It was too generous, which immediately raised her suspicions. Why would you do that? Mason Drake was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke again, his voice was softer. I lost my own family 5 years back. Ranch burned down with them inside while I was away driving cattle to market. I know what it is to try to hold on to something when the whole world seems determined to take it from you. Sometimes folks just need a helping hand, and there is no shame in accepting one when it is offered. The honesty in his words struck something deep in Zara's chest. She studied him more carefully, noting the quality of his horse and tack, the well-maintained rifle in his saddle scabbard, the clean if worn state of his clothes. This was not a drifter or a man down on his luck. This was someone choosing to offer help for reasons she did not fully understand. Just meals and a place to sleep, she asked, still wary. Yes, madam, and maybe some of that coffee I smell coming from your kitchen if you can spare it. Despite everything, Zara felt a small smile tug at the corner of her mouth. The coffee is terrible. I have never mastered the art of making it properly. Well then, I will teach you, Mason said, and there was a warmth in his smile that made her stomach flutter in a way she had not felt in years. Do we have a deal, Mrs. Owens? She knew she should send him away. She knew that accepting help from a strange man would set tongues wagging in town. But the barn roof needed fixing before the next storm, and the fence could not wait much longer, and she was so tired of carrying everything alone. 1 week, she heard herself say. You can stay for 1 week and then you move on, and you sleep in the barn, nowhere near the house. Understood, madam. Mason dismounted in one fluid motion and extended his hand. You will not regret this. As Zara shook his hand, feeling the calluses that matched her own and the warmth of his grip, she wondered if she was making the worst mistake of her life or the best decision she had made in 2 years. Only time would tell. Mason proved himself worth his word from the very first day. After stabling his horse and stowing his gear in the barn, he asked for a tour of the property and listened carefully as Zara explained what needed to be done. He did not interrupt or offer unwanted advice. He simply nodded and asked clarifying questions, treating her like someone whose opinion mattered. By mid-morning, he had his shirt sleeves rolled up and was hammering new boards onto the chicken coop, working with the steady efficiency of a man who knew his craft. Emma watched from a safe distance, fascinated by this stranger who had appeared in their quiet world. Zara tried to focus on her own chores, but she found her gaze drifting toward the barn more often than it should. At noon, she called him in for dinner. She had made vegetable stew and cornbread, simple fare that was all she could manage with her limited supplies. Mason ate with obvious appreciation, complimenting her cooking in a way that seemed genuine rather than merely polite. "This is wonderful, Mrs. Owens," he said, sopping up the last of his stew with a piece of cornbread. "Best meal I have had in weeks." "You must have been eating very poorly then," Zara replied, but she felt a flush of pleasure at the praise. "Mostly hardtack and jerky on the trail," Mason admitted. "A man gets tired of that pretty quick. This feels like home." Emma, who had been silent throughout the meal, suddenly spoke up. "Where is your home, Mr. Drake?" Mason's expression grew distant. "Used to be in Texas, little miss. But that was a long time ago. These days, I guess home is wherever I am at the moment." "That sounds lonely," Emma said with the brutal honesty of childhood. "Emma," Zara chided gently, but Mason just smiled. "You are right, it can be," he told the girl. "But it also means I get to meet interesting people and see new places. Like your beautiful farm here." "It is not beautiful," Emma said matter-of-factly. "Half of it is broken." "Emma." This time Zara's voice was sharper, embarrassment coloring her cheeks, but Mason laughed, a rich sound that filled the small kitchen. "Well, the nice thing about broken things is that they can be fixed. And underneath all those repairs that need doing, I can see the bones of a real fine place. Your daddy built something good here." Emma's face brightened at the mention of her father, and Zara felt her throat tighten. It had been so long since anyone had spoken of Thomas with anything other than pity or awkward sympathy. That afternoon, while Mason worked on the barn roof, Zara went into town. She needed to visit the bank, though she already knew what the answer would be. Still, she had to try. Sioux Falls was growing rapidly, transforming from a rough frontier settlement into a proper town. The streets were busy with wagons and riders, and new buildings seemed to spring up every month. But progress had left Zara behind. She belonged to the old Sioux Falls, the one that had existed when she and Thomas first arrived, full of dreams and determination. The bank manager, Mr. Whitmore, was a portly man with mutton chops and an air of self-importance. He listened to her request for a loan with barely concealed impatience. "Mrs. Owens, we have been through this before," he said, not unkindly but with firm finality. "The bank cannot extend credit to a widow with no collateral and no steady income. It is simply too much of a risk." "I have the farm," Zara argued. "That is collateral." "A farm that is mortgaged and in tax arrears," Mr. Whitmore pointed out. "I am sorry, but my hands are tied. If you cannot pay your taxes, the county will auction the property, and there is nothing I can do about it." Zara left the bank feeling hollow. She had known it was futile, but having it confirmed made the situation feel terribly real. 6 more days until the tax collector arrived. 6 more days until she lost everything Thomas had built, everything she had fought to preserve for Emma's future. She was walking back to where she had left the wagon when she nearly collided with another woman coming out of the general store. "Oh, Zara, I am so sorry," the woman said, steadying herself. It was Margaret Blackwell, one of the few women in town who had remained friendly after Thomas died. Margaret's husband owned a successful freight business, and she had always been kind to Zara in a pitying sort of way. "My fault, Margaret. I was not watching where I was going. Are you all right? You look pale." Before Zara could stop herself, the whole story came spilling out. The taxes, the bank's refusal, the looming deadline. Margaret listened with growing distress, her hand on Zara's arm. "Oh, my dear, why did you not say something sooner? Let me talk to Harold. Perhaps we could lend you the money." "I could not possibly accept that," Zara said, though the offer touched her deeply. "It is too much, and I have no way to pay you back." "Nonsense. We will work something out. Let me speak with Harold tonight." But even as she thanked Margaret and climbed into her wagon, Zara knew she could not take the Blackwells' money. They had their own family to think about, their own future to secure. She would not burden them with her problems. The sun was setting by the time she returned to the farm, painting the prairie in shades of gold and crimson. The wagon rolled into the yard, and Zara stopped short, staring in amazement. The barn roof was completely repaired, straight and solid. The chicken coop looked better than it had in months. Even several sections of fence had been mended, the new rails fitting seamlessly with the old. Mason was at the well, stripped to his undershirt and washing the day's sweat from his face and arms. He looked up as she approached, water dripping from his hair. "You have been busy," Zara said, unable to keep the awe from her voice. "Still plenty to do," Mason replied, reaching for his shirt. "But it is a start. How did things go in town?" She should not tell him. She barely knew this man. But something about the genuine concern in his eyes made her want to share the burden she had been carrying alone for so long. "The bank refused to loan me the money for the taxes," she said quietly. "I have 6 days before the county comes to collect." Mason went very still, his shirt hanging forgotten in his hands. "How much do you owe?" $247. The number felt enormous in the evening quiet. He nodded slowly, something working behind his eyes. "That is a considerable sum." "It might as well be $1 million, Zara said bitterly. "I will never be able to raise it in 6 days. I will lose the farm, and Emma and I will have nowhere to go." "There is always somewhere to go," Mason said gently. "It might not be the place you want, but you will survive this." "I do not want to just survive," Zara heard herself say, surprised by the vehemence in her own voice. "I want to give my daughter a home, a future. I want to honor what my husband built here. Is that so much to ask?" "No," Mason said quietly. "It is not too much at all." He finished pulling on his shirt, and they stood there in the gathering dusk, 2 people carrying burdens too heavy to name. Finally, Mason cleared his throat. "I should check on my horse and settle in for the night. Thank you for dinner, Mrs. Owens. I will see you in the morning." Zara watched him walk toward the barn, his shoulders straight despite the long day's work. There was something about Mason Drake that made her feel less alone, and that terrified her almost as much as losing the farm. The next 3 days fell into a comfortable rhythm. Mason worked from sunup to sundown, tackling the endless list of repairs with tireless energy. Zara found herself watching him more than she should, admiring the competent way he handled tools, the gentleness with which he treated the animals, the patience he showed when Emma peppered him with questions. In the evenings, they would sit on the porch after Emma went to bed, and they would talk. Mason told her about his life in Texas, about the ranch he had built with his wife Sarah and their young son Daniel. He spoke of them with a grief that had mellowed into something bearable, but Zara could hear the love beneath the words. "You ever think about starting over?" she asked one night as they watched fireflies dance across the darkening prairie. "Finding a new place, building something new, I think about it," Mason admitted. "But I am not sure I know how anymore. After they died, I just started moving. Could not seem to stop. Every time I settled somewhere, I would get restless, like there was something I was supposed to be doing somewhere else. Maybe you have not found the right place yet." He turned to look at her, and even in the dim light from the kitchen window, she could see the intensity in his gaze. Maybe not. The moment stretched between them, charged with something Zara was not ready to name. She stood abruptly, smoothing her skirt. "I should get some sleep. Another early morning tomorrow." "Mrs. Owens," Mason said, stopping her at the door. "Zara, it is going to work out somehow. I do not know how yet, but I feel it. You are going to keep this farm." She wanted to believe him, but hope was a dangerous thing. "Good night, Mason." On the fourth day, Mason asked if he could borrow the wagon to go into town. He needed some supplies, he said, materials for the work he was doing. Zara agreed readily, grateful for all he had accomplished. While he was gone, she threw herself into her own chores, trying not to think about the tax collector who would arrive in just 3 more days. Mason returned late in the afternoon, but he seemed distracted during dinner, his mind clearly elsewhere. Zara wondered what had happened in town, but she did not press him. Everyone was entitled to their private thoughts. The next morning, a stranger arrived at the farm. He was a thin, nervous-looking man in a dusty suit, and he introduced himself as Mr. Perkins, the county tax collector. Zara's heart plummeted. He was 2 days early. "Mrs. Owens, I apologize for the earlier arrival," Mr. Perkins said, removing his hat and twisting it in his hands. "But I wanted to inform you personally that your tax debt has been satisfied in full. You are clear with the county." Zara stared at him, unable to process the words. "I do not understand. There must be some mistake." "No mistake, madam. The full amount was paid yesterday at the county office." "You should have received a receipt." He handed her an official document, and there it was in black and white. $247, paid in full. At the bottom of the receipt, in the space for the payer's name, someone had written simply, "Anonymous." But Zara knew. Even before she looked up and saw Mason standing near the barn, watching with an expression of quiet satisfaction, she knew what he had done. "Thank you, Mr. Perkins," she managed to say. "I appreciate you coming all this way to tell me." After the tax collector left, Zara walked slowly toward the barn where Mason was pretending to be busy repairing a saddle. Her emotions were a chaotic swirl of gratitude, confusion, and something that felt dangerously close to anger. "You paid my taxes," she said without preamble. Mason looked up, his hands stilling on the leather. "Yes." "That was $247, Mason. Why would you do such a thing?" "Because you needed help and I was able to give it." "But that is a fortune. That is more money than most people see in a year." "You cannot just give away that kind of money to a stranger." "You are not a stranger," Mason said quietly. "Not anymore." Zara felt tears burning behind her eyes, and she blinked them back furiously. "I cannot accept this. I cannot possibly pay you back." "You must let me find a way to return the money." "I do not want it back." "Then what do you want?" The question came out sharper than she intended, edged with frustration and fear. "Nobody does something like this without wanting something in return." Mason set down the saddle and stood facing her directly. "You are right. I do want something." Her heart was pounding now, a mixture of dread and something else she did not want to examine. "What?" "I want to stop running," Mason said, his voice rough with emotion. "I want to stay here on this farm and help you make it everything it could be. I want to watch Emma grow up and teach her to ride. I want to fix things and build things, and maybe, if you will let me, I want to court you properly. Because in these few days, I have felt more at home than I have in 5 years of wandering. You make me want to put down roots again, Zara." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Zara grabbed the barn door frame to steady herself, her mind reeling. "You barely know me." "I know enough," Mason said. "I know you are strong and stubborn and fiercely protective of the people you love. I know you work yourself to the bone and never complain. I know you make terrible coffee but excellent cornbread. I know that when you smile, which is not often enough, it lights up everything around you. And I know that I have not felt this way about anyone since Sarah died, and it scares me as much as it scares you, but I am done running from things that scare me." Zara was crying now, tears streaming down her face, and she did not care. "I cannot give you anything in return. I have nothing." The farm is barely surviving. I have a daughter to raise. I am damaged goods in the eyes of this whole town." "I did not ask for anything in return," Mason said, taking a step closer. "I paid those taxes because I wanted to, because I could not stand the thought of you losing this place. What happens next is entirely up to you. If you want me to leave, I will go. But if you will give me a chance, if you will let me stay and prove to you that some people actually do good things without expecting anything back, then I am asking you to let me try." She should send him away. It was too much, too fast, too complicated. But when she looked into his eyes, she saw sincerity and hope and a loneliness that matched her own, and she was so tired of being alone. "Stay," she whispered. "Please stay." The relief that flooded Mason's face was beautiful to see. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and when she did not, he took her hand in his. The touch was gentle, respectful, and it sent warmth flooding through her entire body. "I will not let you down," he promised. "You already spent a fortune on me. The only direction from here is up." He laughed at that, and the sound was so warm and genuine that Zara found herself laughing too, giddy with relief and the terrifying possibility of happiness. The news that Mason Drake had paid Zara Owens taxes spread through Sioux Falls like wildfire. Within a week, everyone in town knew about the mysterious cowboy who had swept in and saved the struggling widow from ruin. The gossip was relentless and varied wildly in its interpretations. Some thought it romantic, others scandalous, and more than a few questioned Mason's motives. Zara tried to ignore the whispers and pointed looks when she went to town for supplies, but it was difficult. She had lived her life trying to maintain respectability, and now she was the subject of speculation and judgment. Margaret Blackwell, bless her, remained staunchly supportive. She cornered Zara at the general store one morning, linking their arms together in a show of solidarity. "Pay them no mind," Margaret said firmly. "You have done nothing wrong. Mr. Drake sounds like a good man, and heaven knows you deserve some good fortune after all you have been through." "People think there is something improper happening," Zara said quietly. "People will think what they want to think regardless of the truth. You know you have conducted yourself with absolute propriety, and that is all that matters. Hold your head high, Zara." It helped to have at least one ally in town, but the gossip still stung. When Zara mentioned it to Mason that evening, he listened with a furrowed brow. "I have made things difficult for you," he said. "I did not think about how it would look, a single man staying on your property." "Where else would you go?" Zara asked. "You are sleeping in the barn and you are earning your keep with honest work. We have nothing to be ashamed of. Still, maybe I should find a room in town. Come out during the day to work." "No," Zara said, surprising herself with her vehemence. "If you leave, it will look like we have something to hide. Besides, I need you here. The work is not done yet, and I like having you around." The admission cost her, but Mason's resulting smile made it worthwhile. "I like being around," he said softly. As spring deepened into early summer, the farm began to transform. With Mason's help, Zara planted a much larger vegetable garden than she had managed alone in previous years. He repaired the irrigation system that Thomas had built, making it more efficient. The barn was completely overhauled, its structure sound for the first time in years. Even the house received attention, with Mason fixing the sagging porch and replacing several cracked windows. But more than the physical improvements, there was a different quality to life on the farm now. There was laughter. Emma adored Mason, following him around like a devoted puppy and peppering him with endless questions. He was patient with her, explaining his work and teaching her small tasks she could help with. Watching them together made Zara's heart ache with bittersweet emotion. Emma deserved to have a father figure in her life, but was it fair to let her grow attached to someone who might eventually leave? "He is not going anywhere," Margaret said when Zara voiced this concern during one of her friend's visits. "Anyone can see the man is besotted with you." "He has not said anything like that," Zara protested, though her cheeks flushed. "He does not have to say it. It is written all over his face every time he looks at you, and you are just as bad staring at him when you think no one is watching." "I do not stare." "You absolutely do," Margaret said with a knowing smile. "And there is nothing wrong with that. He is a very handsome man, and from what Harold says, he has an excellent reputation. Some of the other ranchers know him from Texas. He was well respected, owned a successful operation before the tragedy. The fact that he has not squandered his money on drink and gambling like so many men would have speaks well of his character." Zara absorbed this information hungrily. Mason spoke little about his past or his finances, and she had not wanted to pry, but knowing that others vouched for him eased some of her concerns. "I am frightened, Margaret," she admitted. "What if I let myself care for him and he leaves? What if I am making a terrible mistake?" "What if you are making the best decision of your life?" Margaret countered. "You cannot live in fear of being hurt, Zara. Sometimes you have to take a leap of faith." That evening, after Emma was in bed, Zara and Mason sat on the newly repaired porch. The night air was sweet with the scent of the prairie flowers that bloomed in wild profusion across the grasslands. Mason had brought his guitar from the barn, and he strummed it softly, filling the air with a gentle melody. "My mother taught me to play," he said when Zara complimented his skill. "She said music was good for the soul, especially when words were not enough. She sounds like a wise woman. She was. She died when I was 16, pneumonia. My father followed her 2 years later. I think he just did not want to be here without her. That is terribly sad." "But also kind of beautiful in a way," Mason said thoughtfully. "They loved each other so much that one could not imagine life without the other. Not many people find that kind of love." "Did you have it?" Zara asked quietly. "With your wife?" Mason was quiet for a long moment, his fingers stilling on the guitar strings. "I loved Sarah very much. We grew up together, married young. We were happy. But I think we were still learning who we were, still figuring out how to be partners. When she died, I grieved for what we had and what we might have become." "Do you think you could love like that again?" He turned to look at her, and the intensity in his gaze made her breath catch. "I think I already am." The words hung in the air between them, weighted with meaning. Zara's heart was hammering so hard she was sure he could hear it. "Mason, I do not know if I am ready for this. I do not know if I can be what you need." "I do not need you to be anything except yourself," he said gently. "I am not asking for promises or declarations, Zara. I just want you to know that what I feel for you is real. Take all the time you need to figure out how you feel. I am not going anywhere." But Zara was beginning to realize that she already knew how she felt. It terrified her, the way her heart lifted when she saw him in the morning, the way she found excuses to be near him during the day, the way she lay awake at night thinking about him just yards away in the barn. She had thought those feelings died with Thomas, but Mason had awakened something she believed was buried forever. "I feel it too," she whispered. "That terrifies me." "Me too," Mason admitted with a soft laugh. "But maybe being terrified together is better than being alone." He reached out and took her hand, and they sat there in the darkness, holding on to each other like lifelines in uncertain waters. The turning point came in late June, when a group of men from town appeared at the farm. Zara was hanging laundry when she saw them riding up the path, and her stomach clenched with anxiety. There were 5 of them, led by Cyrus Morton, a prominent rancher who had always looked down on smaller farmers like Thomas. Mason emerged from the barn, wiping his hands on a rag. He positioned himself between the riders and Zara, his posture relaxed but alert. "Gentlemen," he said evenly. "What can I do for you?" Cyrus Morton dismounted, his expression unfriendly. "We are here to speak with Mrs. Owens about a matter of concern to the community." "Anything you have to say to Mrs. Owens, you can say to me," Mason replied, his voice still calm but with an edge of steel beneath it. "This does not concern you, Drake. This is about property rights and community standards." Zara stepped forward, her chin raised despite the trembling in her legs. "What is this about, Mr. Morton?" "There has been some concern among the landowners about your, shall we say, living arrangements," Morton said, his lips curling slightly. "It is unseemly for a widow to have an unmarried man living on her property. It sets a bad example and reflects poorly on the community." "Mr. Drake is employed as a laborer on my farm," Zara said, keeping her voice steady through sheer force of will. "He lives in the barn. There is nothing improper about our arrangement. Nevertheless, several of us feel it would be best if he moved on. We do not want that sort of gossip attached to our town." "You mean you do not want people to think a woman can manage on her own with help from someone who is not her husband," Mason said, and there was no mistaking the anger in his voice now. "You are afraid that if Mrs. Owens succeeds here, it might give other women ideas about independence." Morton's face reddened. "Now you listen here, Drake. I do not care who you were in Texas or how much money you have. This is our community and we have standards. Standards that allow you to bully a widow and her child." Mason took a step forward, and despite being outnumbered, there was something about his presence that made Morton take an involuntary step back. "Mrs. Owens has done nothing wrong. She is working hard to build a life for her daughter. If you have a problem with that, then the problem is with you, not her. Are you threatening me? I am telling you to leave. Now. And if you come back here bothering Mrs. Owens again, you and I are going to have a very different conversation." For a tense moment, Zara thought violence might erupt. But then one of the other men, a farmer named Johnson who had always been decent to her, cleared his throat. "Come on, Cyrus. Let us go. We have said our piece." Morton glared at Mason for another long moment before mounting his horse. "This is not over," he said. "Yes, it is," Mason replied quietly. "You made a mistake coming here today. Do not make another one by coming back." The men rode away, and Zara released a breath she had not realized she was holding. Her hands were shaking, and suddenly Mason was there, his arms around her, holding her steady. "I am so sorry," she said against his chest. "I have brought you nothing but trouble." "You have given me a reason to care about something again," Mason said fiercely. "Those men are fools and cowards. Do not let them make you doubt yourself or what we are building here." Emma came running from where she had been hiding behind the house, throwing herself at both of them. Mason scooped her up with one arm, keeping the other around Zara, and the three of them stood there in the yard, a makeshift family facing down the disapproval of the world. That evening, after Emma was asleep, Mason asked Zara to walk with him. They strolled across the prairie, following no particular path, just letting their feet carry them away from the farmhouse. The stars were brilliant overhead, scattered across the sky like diamonds on black velvet. "I have been thinking," Mason said finally, "about what Morton said." Zara's heart sank. "If you want to leave to protect your reputation, I understand." "That is not what I was going to say," Mason said quickly. "In fact, I was thinking the opposite. Those men will not stop gossiping as long as I am living in your barn. There is only one way to make this situation respectable in their eyes." Zara stopped walking, turning to face him. "What are you saying?" Mason took both her hands in his, and even in the starlight she could see the emotion in his eyes. "I am saying that I love you, Zara Owens. I love your strength and your stubbornness, and the way you refuse to give up no matter what the world throws at you. I love how you are with Emma, the gentle mother and the fierce protector all at once. I love coming home to your terrible coffee and your wonderful cooking. I love the sound of your voice and the rare gift of your smile. I want to spend the rest of my life making you happy if you will let me." Tears were streaming down Zara's face, and she could not seem to find her voice. "I know this is fast," Mason continued, his own voice rough with emotion. "I know we have only known each other a couple of months, but I also know that life is short and uncertain, and when you find something worth holding on to, you should not let it go. So I am asking you, Zara, will you marry me? Will you let me be your husband and Emma's father? Will you give me the honor of spending my life loving you?" "Yes," Zara whispered. Then louder, "Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes." Mason let out a shout of joy and swept her up in his arms, spinning her around while she laughed and cried at the same time. When he set her down, he cupped her face in his hands and kissed her for the first time. It was gentle and sweet and filled with promise, and Zara felt like she was coming home after a long journey. "I love you too," she said when they finally broke apart. "I think I have loved you since you fixed my chicken coop and taught Emma to laugh again. You have given me back my life, Mason. You have given me back hope." "We have given each other hope," Mason corrected. "You saved me just as much as I saved you." They stood there under the stars, holding each other, and for the first time in years, Zara felt completely at peace. The future was uncertain, but she would face it with this man by her side, and that made all the difference. The wedding took place 3 weeks later in the small church in Sioux Falls. It was a simple affair, with Margaret Blackwell serving as Zara's witness and one of Mason's new friends from town standing up for him. Emma wore a new dress that Margaret had helped Zara sew, and she clutched a bouquet of prairie flowers with the seriousness of someone performing a very important duty. The church was surprisingly full. Despite the gossip and disapproval from some quarters, many people in town had been touched by the story of the widow and the cowboy. They came to witness this unlikely love story, and more than a few left with tears in their eyes. Zara wore her best dress, altered and updated with new lace that Mason had insisted on buying for her. As she walked down the aisle and saw him waiting for her at the altar, so handsome in his new suit and so full of love that it shone from his eyes, she felt her heart swell until she thought it might burst. The minister kept the ceremony short and sweet, but every word felt weighted with meaning. When Mason slipped the simple gold band on her finger and promised to love and cherish her for all his days, Zara knew he meant every word. And when she made her own vows, speaking from the heart about second chances and unexpected blessings, there was not a dry eye in the church. "You may kiss your bride," the minister said with a smile. Mason did not need to be told twice. He pulled Zara close and kissed her with a tenderness that made her knees weak, and the church erupted in applause and cheers. The reception was held at the Blackwell home, with Margaret presiding over a feast that seemed to appear by magic. People brought food and gifts, and the atmosphere was one of genuine celebration. Even Cyrus Morton made a brief appearance, though his congratulations were stiff and clearly offered only for the sake of propriety. Mason accepted them graciously and let the man leave without comment. "You are a better man than I am," Zara murmured to her new husband as they watched Morton ride away. "I am just a happy man," Mason replied, pulling her close. "Nothing he says or does can touch that." As the sun set and the party began to wind down, Mason and Zara prepared to return to their farm. It would be their wedding night, and Zara felt a flutter of nervous anticipation. She was not an innocent, but it had been so long, and this mattered so much. Emma would be spending the night with the Blackwells, giving the newlyweds privacy, As they hugged the little girl goodbye, Mason knelt down to look her in the eyes. "You know I am going to be your father now," he said gently, "if that is all right with you." Emma threw her arms around his neck. "I already thought of you as my papa," she whispered. "I have been practicing calling you that in my head." Mason held her tight, and Zara saw him blink back tears. "Well then, you can start saying it out loud whenever you want." "Okay, Papa," Emma said, testing out the word, and then she giggled with delight at how natural it sounded. The ride back to the farm was quiet, both of them lost in thought. When they arrived, Mason lifted Zara down from the wagon, and instead of setting her on her feet, he carried her toward the house. "What are you doing?" she asked, laughing. "Carrying my bride over the threshold," he said. "It is tradition. But I have crossed this threshold 1,000 times." "Not as my wife," Mason said, and there was something in his voice that made her heart skip. "Everything is different now." He was right. As he carried her into the house and set her gently on her feet in the parlor, Zara realized that this familiar space had been transformed. It was no longer just her refuge. It was their home, the place where they would build their life together. Mason lit a lamp, and in the soft golden glow he turned to her. "Are you nervous?" he asked softly. "A little," Zara admitted. "It has been a long time since I was anyone's wife." "We have all the time in the world," Mason said, taking her hands. "We do not have to rush anything. I just want to be with you, Zara, however that looks tonight." His understanding and patience made her love him even more. She reached up and touched his face, tracing the strong line of his jaw, the small scar above his left eyebrow. "I want to be your wife in every way," she said quietly. "I want to start our life together tonight." Mason's eyes darkened with emotion and desire. He kissed her gently at first, and then with growing passion as she responded in kind. They made their way to the bedroom, leaving a trail of carefully removed clothing, learning each other with hands and lips and whispered words of love. When they finally came together, it was with a rightness that Zara had never experienced before. This was not just physical union. It was the joining of two souls that had been wandering alone and had finally found their home in each other. Mason was gentle and patient, making sure of her comfort and pleasure before seeking his own, and when they lay tangled together afterward, both breathless and amazed, Zara felt tears of joy sliding down her cheeks. "Happy tears, I hope," Mason murmured, brushing them away with his thumb. "So happy," Zara said. "I never thought I would feel this way again. I never thought I deserved to." "You deserve every happiness in the world," Mason said fiercely, pulling her close against his chest. "And I am going to spend the rest of my life making sure you get it." They fell asleep wrapped in each other's arms, and for the first time in years, Zara's sleep was peaceful and untroubled by nightmares or worry. The months that followed were the happiest of Zara's life. Mason threw himself into improving the farm with the enthusiasm of a man who had finally found his purpose. He expanded the barn, built a new chicken coop that was the envy of the neighboring farms, and installed a proper irrigation system that allowed them to plant even more crops. But more than the physical improvements, it was the feeling of partnership that transformed everything. Mason consulted Zara on every decision, valuing her opinion and experience. They worked side by side in the fields, and in the evenings, they would plan and dream about the future together. Emma blossomed under the attention of two loving parents, growing more confident and outgoing with each passing week. The farm began to prosper in a way it never had before. The combination of Mason's capital for investment, his farming expertise, and Zara's tireless work ethic proved to be a powerful force. By harvest time, they had a surplus of crops to sell at market, and for the first time in years, Zara went to bed at night without worrying about money. The people in town gradually accepted the marriage, won over by Mason's friendly demeanor and generous nature. He made friends easily, always ready to help a neighbor in need or offer advice to struggling farmers. Zara, too, found her social standing improving now that she had the protection of a husband's name and presence. In November, just as winter was settling over the prairie, Zara realized that she was pregnant. The discovery filled her with a complex mix of emotions. She was 32 years old, and it had been 9 years since Emma's birth. She had assumed her childbearing years were behind her. She told Mason on a cold evening as they sat before the fireplace, Emma already tucked into bed upstairs. His reaction was everything she could have hoped for. He let out a whoop of joy that echoed through the house, then immediately worried that he had been too loud and might wake Emma. He pulled Zara into his arms and held her as if she were made of glass. "Are you happy?" he asked, his voice full of wonder. "Terrified," Zara admitted. "But yes, so happy. Are you?" "I never thought I would get this chance again," Mason said, his hand moving to rest gently on her still flat stomach. "A child of our own. God, Zara, you have given me so much." "We have given each other everything," Zara corrected, echoing his words from months ago. The pregnancy progressed smoothly, and Emma was thrilled at the prospect of becoming a big sister. She spent hours discussing baby names with Mason and helping Zara prepare the nursery in the small room off the main bedroom. Winter was hard on the prairie, with howling winds and snow that piled in drifts higher than a man's head. But inside the farmhouse, there was warmth and love and anticipation. Mason insisted on taking over the heavy chores, refusing to let Zara do anything that might strain her condition. She protested at first, unused to being coddled, but eventually she learned to accept his care as the gift of love it was. In late spring, as the prairie was turning green and the first wildflowers were appearing, Zara went into labor. Margaret came to assist, along with the local midwife, while Mason paced downstairs and tried to stay out of the way. Emma stayed with the Blackwells, spared the ordeal of childbirth. The labor was long and difficult, harder than Zara remembered from Emma's birth. There were moments when she thought she could not endure another minute of pain, when the waves of agony seemed endless. But then she would hear Mason's voice from downstairs, feel Margaret's steady hand on her arm, and she would find the strength to keep going. Finally, as dawn was breaking over the prairie in shades of pink and gold, a baby's cry filled the farmhouse. Zara collapsed back against the pillows, exhausted and elated as the midwife placed a squalling, red-faced infant on her chest. "A boy," the midwife announced with a smile. "And a healthy pair of lungs on him, too." "A boy." Zara looked down at her son, his tiny fists waving in the air, his eyes squeezed shut as he announced his displeasure at being born into this cold, bright world. Love flooded through her, so intense it was almost painful. "Someone better go tell that husband of yours he can come up now," Margaret said with a laugh. "I think he has worn a path in the floor downstairs." Mason burst into the room moments later, his eyes wild with worry until they landed on Zara and the baby. Then his entire face transformed with wonder and joy. He approached the bed slowly as if afraid he might be dreaming, and when Zara held out her hand to him, he took it with fingers that trembled. "A son," Zara said softly. "We have a son, Mason." Mason stared down at the baby with an expression of awe. "He is perfect. You are perfect. Can I hold him?" Zara carefully transferred the infant to Mason's arms, and watching her strong, capable husband cradle their tiny son with such gentleness made fresh tears spring to her eyes. This was the family she had never dared to hope for, the happiness she had thought was lost to her forever. "What should we name him?" Mason asked, unable to take his eyes off the baby's face. They had discussed names during the pregnancy, but Zara suddenly knew exactly what felt right. "I was thinking we could name him after your father. You said his name was James." Mason's eyes snapped up to meet hers, and they were bright with unshed tears. "Are you sure? I thought you wanted to name him after your father." "My father was Edward, and I love that name," Zara said. "But I want to honor your family too. Besides, he looks like a James to me. James Edward Drake. What do you think?" "I think it is perfect," Mason said, his voice thick with emotion. "I think you are perfect. Thank you, Zara. Thank you for this incredible gift." Emma was brought home later that day to meet her new brother. She was initially shy around the tiny, noisy creature that had taken over her mother's attention, but with patient guidance from both Zara and Mason, she gradually warmed to her role as big sister. By the end of the week, she was fiercely protective of little James, announcing to anyone who would listen that he was the best baby in the whole territory. Life settled into a new rhythm, busier than before, but filled with the kind of chaos that comes from a house full of love. James was a good baby, healthy and strong, and he grew quickly under Zara's devoted care. Mason proved to be a natural father, taking to midnight feedings and diaper changes with the same competence he brought to everything else. The farm continued to prosper. With the profits from their successful harvest, Mason expanded their cattle herd and purchased additional acreage from a neighbor who was moving back east. The Owens farm, as it was still known in town despite Zara's name change, was becoming one of the most successful operations in the area. But success brought its own challenges. Cyrus Morton and a few other ranchers who had opposed Zara from the beginning now resented Mason's prosperity. There were mutterings that he had bought his way into the community, that he was not a real farmer because he had money. Mason ignored the gossip, focusing instead on his work and his family. The confrontation came in late summer, when James was 3 months old. Mason had taken a load of grain to market in Sioux Falls, leaving Zara alone at the farm with the children. She was hanging laundry when she saw riders approaching, and her heart sank when she recognized Morton leading a group of 4 men. She quickly called Emma inside and told her to stay with the baby, no matter what happened. Then she stepped out onto the porch, her rifle held loosely in her hands. "Not aimed at anyone, but clearly present. Mrs. Drake," Morton said, his tone mocking the formality, "we need to discuss a matter of some urgency." "My husband is in town," Zara said calmly. "If you have business to discuss, you should speak with him. Our business is with you. There has been some concern about the water rights on your property. Some of us feel that your husband has been diverting more than his fair share from the creek." It was a lie, and Zara knew it. The creek ran through several properties, and Mason had been meticulous about only using their allotted portion. This was about intimidation, about putting her in her place. "The water usage is well within our rights," Zara said firmly. "If you have a legal dispute, you can take it up with the county authorities." "Maybe we do not feel like waiting for the county," one of the other men said, a rough-looking character that Zara recognized as one of Morton's ranch hands. "Maybe we think you need to be taught a lesson about respecting your neighbors." Zara's grip tightened on the rifle, but she kept her voice steady. "I think you gentlemen should leave now, before this becomes something you regret," Morton laughed. "You think you can stop all of us with that rifle? You are just a woman playing at being a rancher. She is not alone." The voice came from behind the group, and they turned to see Mason sitting on his horse at the edge of the yard. He must have seen them from the road and circled around. His own rifle rested across his saddle, and his expression was deadly calm. "Drake," Morton said, trying to regain his bluster, "we were just having a conversation with your wife about water rights. I heard, and now you are leaving." Mason urged his horse forward slowly, and there was something in his posture that radiated danger. "I have been patient with you, Morton. I have ignored your insults and your attempts to undermine my reputation, but you do not come onto my property and threaten my wife. Not ever." "We were not threatening anyone," Morton protested, but his voice lacked conviction. "Yes, you were, and if you ever do it again, I will not be this understanding. The next time you have a problem with me or my family, you bring it to me directly, like a man. Otherwise, you stay away from this farm. Are we clear?" For a long moment the two men locked eyes. Then Morton jerked his reins and turned his horse. "Let us go, boys. We have wasted enough time here." As the men rode away, Zara set down her rifle and released a shaky breath. Mason dismounted and pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. "Are you all right? Did they hurt you?" "No, they just wanted to scare me. It worked." "I am so sorry. I should not have left you alone." "You cannot be here every second of every day," Zara said, though she was grateful he had returned when he did. "Besides, I can take care of myself." "I know you can," Mason said, pulling back to look at her face. "But you should not have to. Not anymore." The incident with Morton prompted Mason to hire a young farmhand named Peter to help with the work around the property. Peter was 18, hardworking and eager to learn, and his presence meant that Zara was never completely alone on the farm. It also freed up Mason's time to focus on expansion plans and improvements. As James grew from an infant into a chubby, laughing toddler, Zara marveled at how different her life looked compared to just 2 years ago. Then, she had been desperate and alone, facing the loss of everything she held dear. Now, she had a loving husband, 2 beautiful children, and a farm that was flourishing beyond her wildest dreams. Emma turned 10 and showed signs of becoming a fine horsewoman under Mason's tutelage. She had his patience and Zara's determination, a combination that served her well. James was walking by his first birthday, getting into everything with the fearless curiosity of a child who knew he was loved and protected. In the spring of 1881, when James was 2 years old, Zara discovered she was pregnant again. This time, the news was met with pure joy and no fear. She knew what to expect, and she had complete confidence in her body and her ability to bring another life into the world. The pregnancy was easier than her previous one, perhaps because she was not stressed and exhausted from trying to maintain the farm alone. She continued working alongside Mason for most of her term, only slowing down in the final months when her belly made it difficult to move comfortably. Emma was 11 now, old enough to be a genuine help with James and the household tasks. She took her responsibilities seriously, acting as Zara's right hand and proving herself to be a capable young woman. This time, when Zara went into labor in late autumn, it was shorter and less intense. Mason stayed with her throughout, holding her hand and coaching her through the contractions. When their second son was born just after midnight, crying lustily and waving his fists, Mason cut the cord himself with steady hands. "Another boy," he said with wonder. "We make beautiful sons, wife." "We certainly do," Zara agreed, exhausted but elated as she held her newest child. This baby had a shock of dark hair like Emma and Thomas's coloring, and Zara felt a pang of bittersweet emotion. Her first husband would never be forgotten, but he had been replaced in her heart and her life by this man who loved her so completely. They named the baby Samuel Thomas Drake, honoring both Mason's grandfather and Zara's first husband. Mason had suggested it, wanting to ensure that Emma's father was remembered in their growing family. "Thomas was a good man," Mason said when Zara questioned whether it bothered him. "He built the foundation that I have been privileged to build upon." Emma should always remember her father, and this is one way to honor his memory. It was gestures like this that reminded Zara why she loved Mason so deeply. He was secure enough in their relationship to honor the past rather than feel threatened by it. The years rolled on, each one bringing new joys and challenges. The farm expanded until it was one of the largest in the region. Mason's business acumen combined with Zara's practical management skills made them a formidable team. They employed several hands now, including Peter, who had grown into a trusted foreman. Emma blossomed into a beautiful young woman, intelligent and capable. She had suitors starting to circle by the time she was 16, but she had high standards, shaped by the example of her mother's second marriage. She wanted what Zara and Mason had, true partnership and abiding love. James grew into a sturdy, adventurous boy who idolized his father and followed him everywhere. Samuel was quieter, more studious, with a love of books that Zara encouraged by teaching him to read at an early age. In 1885, when Zara was 39 years old, she gave birth to their first daughter. After 3 sons in a row, including Emma's brother who had arrived in 1883, named Robert after Mason's grandfather, the tiny girl seemed almost miraculous. They named her Sarah Margaret, after Mason's first wife and Zara's dear friend Margaret Blackwell. The baby had Zara's red gold hair and Mason's blue eyes, and she wrapped her father around her tiny finger from the moment she was born. Mason was a devoted father to all his children, but there was something about this little girl that reduced him to complete mush. "You are spoiling her," Zara observed with amusement as she watched Mason rock the baby and sing to her for the 3rd time in an hour. "She is my princess," Mason said unapologetically. "I am allowed to spoil her. She is going to be impossible as a teenager if you keep this up." "Then I will deal with an impossible teenager," Mason said, pressing a kiss to the baby's downy head. "It will be worth it." By 1888, the Drake family was a fixture in Sioux Falls society. Their farm was the most successful in the region, employing over a dozen workers and producing cattle, grain, and vegetables that were sold throughout the territory. Mason served on the town council, using his influence to push for improvements in schools and infrastructure. Zara was active in the church and various charitable organizations, her early struggles making her sympathetic to others facing hard times. Emma married at 19 to a young lawyer from Minneapolis who had come to Sioux Falls seeking opportunity. The wedding was a grand affair, attended by seemingly half the territory. Zara cried throughout the ceremony, tears of joy and pride for the remarkable woman her daughter had become. James, at 9 years old, was already talking about becoming a rancher like his father. Samuel, at 7, was more interested in books and numbers, showing an aptitude for mathematics that suggested he might follow a different path. Robert, at 5, was the wild card, equally happy working with animals or playing make-believe games. And little Sarah, at 3, ruled the household with an iron fist disguised in pinafores and ribbons. One evening in late summer, after the children were all in bed, Zara and Mason sat on their porch as they had done countless times over the years. The porch had been expanded and improved, now wrapping around 2 sides of the house. Comfortable rocking chairs sat side by side, and hanging baskets of flowers added color and fragrance. "You remember the first time we sat here together?" Mason asked, reaching over to take Zara's hand. "I remember thinking you were either crazy or too good to be true," Zara said with a laugh. "Possibly both." "And what do you think now?" "I think I am the luckiest woman in the world," Zara said softly. "I think I was given a second chance at happiness that I did not deserve, and I have tried every day since to be worthy of it." "You have always been worthy of it," Mason said, bringing her hand to his lips. "You saved me, Zara. I was just drifting through life, running from my pain and my past. You gave me a reason to stop running. You gave me a home and a family and a purpose. Everything good in my life started the day I rode up to this farm and saw you standing there, fierce and beautiful and trying so hard to hold everything together. You paid my taxes, Zara said, a hint of wonder still in her voice after all these years. $247, and you asked for nothing in return. I asked for everything, Mason corrected. I asked for your trust and your time and eventually your heart. You gave me all of that and more. I would do it again, Zara said. Every moment, every choice, every challenge, I would do it all again to end up right here with you. They sat in comfortable silence, watching fireflies dance across the darkening prairie. The farm was quiet around them, the animals settled for the night, the children sleeping peacefully in their beds. Everything they had built together stood solid and secure, a testament to what two people could accomplish when they worked together in love and partnership. The years continued to unfold, bringing with them the usual mixture of joy and sorrow that makes up a life fully lived. Margaret Blackwell passed away in 1892, and Zara grieved deeply for the friend who had stood by her in her darkest times. But she honored Margaret's memory by continuing the charitable work they had started together, ensuring that widows and struggling families in the community received the help they needed. Emma gave them their first grandchild in 1893, a red-faced, squalling boy who looked just like his mother had at that age. Watching Mason hold his grandson, Zara was struck by how far they had come from that desperate morning when she had received the tax notice. They had built not just a farm, but a legacy that would continue through generations. James took over more of the ranch operations as he got older, showing the same combination of business sense and work ethic that had made his father successful. Samuel went east to university, studying engineering and making his parents proud with his academic achievements. Robert proved to be a gifted horse trainer, with an almost supernatural ability to gentle even the most difficult animals. And Sarah, growing into a spirited young woman, had inherited her mother's fierce independence and her father's charm. In 1895, when Zara was 49 years old, Mason surprised her with a trip to San Francisco. They left the farm in James and Peter's capable hands and took the train west, spending 2 weeks exploring the city and marveling at how much the world had changed since they were young. One evening, as they walked along the waterfront watching the sun set over the Pacific Ocean, Mason stopped and turned to Zara. "You have any regrets?" he asked. Zara considered the question seriously. "I regret that Thomas died so young that he never got to see Emma grow up. I regret the hard years, the struggling and the fear, but those regrets are not about choices I made. They are just about the way life unfolded. And the choices you made, accepting my help, marrying me, building this life together, those are the things I am most proud of," Zara said firmly. "You asked me once to take a leap of faith, and I did. It was the best decision I ever made." Mason pulled her close, and they stood there on the waterfront, two people who had found each other in the midst of heartache and loss and built something beautiful together. As they grew older, they gradually passed more responsibilities to their children. James ran the ranch with skill and innovation, implementing new techniques and expanding into new markets. Samuel returned from university and established an engineering firm in Sioux Falls, using his expertise to bring modern improvements to the region. Robert started a successful horse breeding operation on a portion of the family land. And Sarah, after shocking everyone by attending college, became a teacher, dedicated to improving education for children throughout the territory. South Dakota achieved statehood in 1889, and the Drake family, was part of the celebration, having been instrumental in the territory's development and growth. The wild frontier that Zara and Mason had known in their youth was being tamed and civilized, though the wide prairies and big skies remained as beautiful as ever. In 1900, as the new century dawned, Mason and Zara celebrated their 22nd wedding anniversary. Their family gathered at the farm for a big party, with children and grandchildren filling every corner of the expanded house. There were 11 grandchildren now, ranging from infants to teenagers, and the noise and chaos were wonderful. That evening, after everyone had left or gone to bed, Mason and Zara once again found themselves on the porch. They were older now, with gray in their hair and lines on their faces earned through years of laughter and hard work. But the love between them was as strong as ever, perhaps stronger for having weathered all that life had thrown at them. 22 years, Mason said wonderingly. Sometimes it feels like yesterday, and sometimes it feels like you have been beside me forever. Both, Zara agreed. It is both somehow. I love you more today than I did when I married you, Mason said. I did not think that was possible, but every day with you just adds to it. You are my best friend, my partner, the love of my life. And you are mine, Zara said, leaning her head on his shoulder. My cowboy who rode in and saved me, even though I did not want to admit I needed saving. We saved each other, Mason said, as he always did. And we built something that will last long after we are gone. They sat there in the peaceful darkness, holding hands and listening to the sounds of the prairie night. Inside the house, their children and grandchildren slept safely, secure in the legacy that Zara and Mason had created through love and determination, and the courage to take a chance on each other. The years passed gently for Zara and Mason. They stepped back from active management of the ranch, content to advise and support their children while enjoying the fruits of their labor. They traveled some, visiting their scattered family and seeing more of the country they had helped to build. But they always returned to the farm, to the land that had brought them together and witnessed their love story. In 1910, they celebrated their 32nd anniversary surrounded by 4 children, 23 grandchildren, and 3 great-grandchildren. The family had grown far beyond what either of them had imagined that first day when Mason rode up to the struggling farm and offered his help. Mason's health began to decline in his late 70s. Nothing dramatic, just the slow wearing down that comes with age. But he faced it with the same courage and grace he had brought to everything else in his life. Zara nursed him tenderly, repaying the years of love and care he had given her. One spring morning in 1915, Mason woke early and asked Zara to walk with him out to the spot where he had first proposed. She helped him down the porch steps, and they made their way slowly across the prairie, their pace much slower than it had been 37 years ago, but their hands clasped just as tightly. I want you to know, Mason said as they stood looking out over the land that had been their life's work, that every single day with you has been a gift. I have never once regretted riding up to your farm that day. Not once. Neither have I, Zara said, tears streaming down her weathered cheeks. You gave me everything, Mason. You gave me love and hope and a family. You showed me that life could be beautiful again, even after tragedy. I will never be able to thank you enough for that. You do not need to thank me, Mason said, cupping her face in his gnarled hands. Loving you has been the greatest privilege of my life. Mason passed away peacefully in his sleep 2 weeks later, with Zara holding his hand and their children gathered around. He was 81 years old, and he had lived a full, rich life surrounded by love. The funeral was attended by hundreds of people from across the state. Mason Drake had become a respected figure in South Dakota, known for his generosity, his business acumen, and his devotion to his family and community. But for Zara, he had simply been her beloved husband, the cowboy who had paid her taxes and asked for nothing except the chance to love her. Zara lived another 10 years, surrounded by her children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. She never remarried, content with the memories of the two great loves of her life. She spent her final years telling stories to the young ones, ensuring they understood the history of their family and the values that had built their legacy. She spoke often of Mason, of his kindness and his strength, of the day he had appeared in her life like an answer to a prayer she had been afraid to voice. She wanted the children to understand that love could come in unexpected ways, that second chances were real, and that sometimes the most beautiful things in life came from the darkest moments. When Zara passed away in 1925 at the age of 79, she was laid to rest beside Mason in the family plot on a hill overlooking the farm. The marker bore both their names, along with a simple inscription that James had chosen. Together they built a legacy of love. The farm remained in the Drake family for generations, passed down through their children and grandchildren. Each successive generation added their own improvements and innovations, but they never forgot the story of how it all began. The tale of the widow who owed taxes she could not pay and the cowboy who paid them and asked for nothing became part of the family mythology, told and retold until it took on an almost legendary quality. But at its heart, it was a simple story of love and courage. It was about two people who had both known terrible loss finding each other at just the right moment. It was about the strength it takes to accept help when you desperately need it, and the generosity of spirit that offers help without expectation of reward. It was about building something lasting out of the ashes of grief, about second chances and new beginnings, and it was about love, the kind of love that transforms lives, that builds families, that creates legacies. The kind of love that starts with a single act of kindness and grows into something that lasts for generations. The kind of love that makes all the struggle and hardship worthwhile because you face it together. Emma Drake Harrison, the girl who had once been 8 years old and watching her mother struggle alone, lived to be 93. She never tired of telling her own grandchildren about her stepfather, about how he had ridden into their lives when they needed him most and changed everything. She would describe the way he had looked at her mother, with such love and respect, and how her mother had blossomed under his care. "Your great-grandmother was the strongest woman I ever knew," Emma would say. She survived losing her first husband, faced down poverty and social judgment, and nearly lost everything she had worked for. But she never gave up. And when help came in the form of a kind stranger, she had the courage to accept it. That takes a different kind of strength. The last Drake to live on the original farm was Mason and Zara's great-great-grandson, who maintained it until the 1980s. By then, Sioux Falls had grown into a city, and the farm was surrounded by suburban development. But the core of the original property remained, a testament to what Thomas Owens had started and Mason Drake had preserved and expanded. When the farm was finally sold to become a historical site, the papers found in the attic of the old farmhouse told the story in faded ink and careful ledgers. There were the original tax notices, the receipts showing payment, and dozens of letters between Zara and Mason during their courtship and marriage. There were photographs showing a stern but beautiful red-haired woman and a tall, broad-shouldered man with kind eyes. There were pictures of children and grandchildren, of celebrations and ordinary moments, all documenting a life fully lived. But the most treasured document was a letter that Zara had written to Mason on their 25th wedding anniversary, found tucked into his Bible after he died. In it, She had tried to put into words what his love had meant to her. My dearest Mason, 25 years ago today, I stood before God and promised to love and cherish you for all my days. At the time, I could not have imagined how deeply that love would grow, how completely you would transform my life. You came to me when I was at my lowest point, when I had lost hope and was facing ruin. You paid my debts and asked for nothing in return except the chance to prove yourself worthy of my trust. In doing so, you taught me that true love is not about what we can get from each other, but about what we can give. You gave me everything, your strength when I was weak, your hope when I had despaired, your steady presence when I felt alone. You loved Emma as your own daughter and gave her the father she deserved. You built our home into something beyond my wildest dreams. But most of all, you loved me, not in spite of my struggles and scars, but including all of them. You made me feel valued and cherished every single day of our marriage. I know I do not say it often enough, but you are the best thing that ever happened to me. My cowboy, my love, my life. Forever yours, Zara. It was a fitting testament to a love story that began with a desperate widow, an impossible debt, and a stranger's inexplicable generosity. A story that proved that sometimes the darkest moments in our lives are simply setting the stage for the most beautiful chapters yet to come. A story that reminded generations of their descendants that love, real love, is built not on grand gestures alone but on daily choices to show up, to care, to work side by side toward a common future. The farm might have become a historical site, the players in the original drama long since gone to their rest, but the legacy of Zara Owens and Mason Drake lived on. It lived on in the values they had instilled in their children, in the prosperity they had built from near ruin, in the love story they had created out of heartbreak and hope. It lived on in every marriage that proved love could bloom in unexpected places, in every person who offered help without expectation of reward, in every second chance that led to happiness. And on quiet spring evenings, when the wind swept across the South Dakota prairie, and the last rays of the setting sun painted the sky in gold and crimson, it was almost possible to imagine two figures standing hand in hand, looking out over the land they had loved and worked together. The widow who had faced ruin with courage and the cowboy who had paid her taxes and asked for nothing except the privilege of loving her. Together forever, in memory and in the legacy they had built, a testament to the enduring power of love, generosity, and the courage to embrace second chances.